في أكبر الكتب.
Good morning, and welcome to the Morning Report. The Morning Report is a production of fightbackmedia.com, 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 and fightbackmediatv.com. We are thrilled that you are here this Monday morning. It's going to be a great week. Last week was a great week. We're looking forward to another great week. You know, some of these questions that have to be asked and more importantly have to be answered. We started, I was having a conversation with the wife on the way home from church, and she was like, it's really sad that when I talk about the media, I'm talking about ABC, NBC, CBS, talking about MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, have been complicit in promoting the liberal narrative. I guess maybe it's before even that, but I didn't notice really until Barack Obama. And what I mean by it, even during that time, it was sort of on the sly because the things that we wanted to know about Barack Obama, nobody was interested in talking about. And if you talked about it, then you were somehow racist. You were somehow, I don't know, you were un-American. If you wanted to know simple stuff like, yeah, I've never heard of this guy. He's a senator from Illinois. Uh-huh. Okay. He wants to be the president of the United States. So let's get to know him. Let's know more about it. Heck, we knew, I mean, there was a article in Reader's Digest about Ronald Reagan's prostate or colon on Ronald Reagan's colon. Yeah, we knew a lot about Reagan, right? Now Reagan was governor of California. Reagan was the president of the Screen Actors Guild. And we knew Reagan. Reagan was, bedtime for Bonzo, all that stuff, right? But we didn't really know anything. Well, most Americans didn't know anything about Barack Obama, except that he was biracial, but wasn't being pushed as a biracial candidate. He was being pushed as a black candidate with a wife and two young daughters. Sort of this idea that they sent them over from central casting, right? And to ask anything about it was just terrible. You were awful, right? So this is when they started covering for Barack Obama. This is when the media was in the tank for the left. This is when we noticed that the media was in the tank for the left. And now it's insane. Now it's right in your face. Now MSNBC and CNN are right in your face. All of their opinion shows, and most of the shows they have, and Fox News as well, are opinion shows. And on every single one of them, Republicans are bad. Republicans are homophobic, Islamophobic, bigots, you name it. There are no redeeming qualities for being a conservative on any of these networks. Now, a network that has sort of stayed kind of, because it's radio, under the radar, so to speak, because it's radio, is NPR, National Public Radio. Now, I just can't imagine anyone would think that National Public Radio isn't left, because it is. Here's a recent article from townhall.com. When it comes to liberal media bias, there's perhaps no bigger culprit than NPR. Yuri Berliner, who's a senior editor at NPR, wrote what's been called a bombshell expose and a voice of sanity for the free press that spoke to the rampant bias. Keep in mind, NPR does take taxpayer money. Although NPR has tried to downplay the issue, it's not exactly going away. In his Friday episode of The Verdict, Senator Ted Cruz, Republican from Texas, addressed the matter, highlighting the need to defund NPR. To begin the segment, co-host Ben Ferguson shared what is no doubt on the minds of many, especially as he worked in media. I don't understand why my taxpayer dollars are subsidizing a hardcore leftist organization, and while I'm paying their salaries in NPR, that's the reality. He pointed out before mentioning Berliner's revelations, reminding Berliner had been there for 25 years. As Cruz quoted from the start of the op-ed, and I read this op-ed. You know the stereotype of the NPR listener: a EV driving, wordle playing, tote bag carrying coastal elite. It doesn't precisely describe me, but it's not far off. I'm Sarah Lawrence educated. I was raised by a lesbian peace activist mother. I drive a Subaru. And Spotify says my listening habits are most similar to people in Berkeley. Berliner says, I fit the NPR mold. I'll cop to that. So when I got the job here 25 years ago, I never looked back. As the senior editor of the business desk, where the news is always breaking, we've covered upheavals in the workplace, supermarket prices, social media, and AI. It's true, NPR has always had a liberal bent. But during most of my tenure here, an open mind, curious culture prevailed. We were nerdy, but not knee-jerk, activist or scolding. In recent years, however, that has changed. Today, those who listen to NPR or read its coverage online find something different: a distilled worldview of a very small segment of U.S. population. If you are conservative, you will read this and say, well, duh, it's always been that way. But Berliner says it hasn't. For decades since the founding of NPR, a wide swath of America tuned into NPR for reliable journalism. And I'm going to stop there. I'm going to finish his statement here, his op-ed in a little bit. I talked to so many people, especially because I work in education, who said, "Well, we don't listen to anything on TV. We don't listen to CNN or MSNBC or any of those clowns. I listen to NPR because NPR is more, they were people were under the impression that NPR was on the level, right? And maybe because everything was said like this, hardly anything was yelled, and it was all said like this. Well, welcome to NPR. Welcome to fresh air. Remember, everything was like this. So maybe if you heard it like this, well, it had to be true, right? NPR is right down the middle. Anyway, uh, so again, so a large swath of America tuned in NPR for reliable journalism and gorgeous audio pieces with birds singing in the Amazon, right? Millions came to us for conversations that exposed us to voices around the country and the world radically different from our own, engaging precisely because they were unguarded and unpredictable. No image generated more pride within NPR than the farmer listening to the morning edition on his or her tractor at sunrise. Back in 2011, although NPR's audience tilted a bit to the left, it still bore a resemblance to America at large. 26% of listeners describe themselves as conservatives, 23% of as middle of the road. So like 49% of their listeners consider themselves an NPR listener. They trust an NPR. And only 30% as liberal. Now, by 2023, the picture was completely different. Only 11% described themselves as very or somewhat conservatives, 21% middle of the road. That's 42%. I mean, it's 33% down from 49. And 67% of listeners said they were very or somewhat liberal. We weren't just losing conservatives, we were also losing moderates and the traditional liberals. An open-minded spirit no longer exists within NPR, and now, predictably, we don't have an audience that reflects America. That would be a problem for an openly um, polemical news outlet serving a niche audience, but for NPR, which purports to consider all things, it's devastating for both its journalism and business model. Wow. So the podcast referenced an interview that Berliner did with Barry Weiss, who had resigned from the editorial board at the New York Times. Remember that? And you can still see her resignation letter is on fightbackmedia.com, fightbackmedia.com, fightbackmedia.com. Berliner and Weiss discussed how Berliner warned that NPR went from having a bent to a bias. Although Berliner said that it was cumulative rather than one event that brought on the change, he did make clear how hard NPR took Donald Trump being elected in 2016, especially when they assumed, like all of the media did, that Hillary Clinton would win. He admitted that I think after a while we started covering Trump in a way that a lot of legacy news organizations were trying to damage his presidency, to even find anything we could do to harm him, which is where the Russian collusion narrative came into play. They were all about Russia, 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 Russia. Berliner called it sort of catnip to go with the narrative, even though he admitted it was just rumors and a lot of it based on pretty shoddy documents or evidence. It wasn't really solid, but I think it was compelling. He referred to Adam Schiff as their muse for the Trump collusion story. Berliner emphasized they had on constant. Schiff was just censored by the House last June for pushing the Russian collusion hoax. When discussing that excerpt, Cruz and Ferguson repeatedly emphasized their shock and dismay over how NPR, which again is taxpayer funded, was trying to damage Trump's presidency, to even find anything we could do to harm him. The senator referred to it as a damning admission. He also pointed out that the change was obvious to any conservative, but it said something for a senior editor to go and blow the whistle like this. This is why independent sources of information are so important. People ask me all the time, so where'd you get your news? Well, from a compendium of sources. And then based on what I know and based on not being stupid, sort of mash it all together compared to what I know is reality and what I can see. And that's where our opinions come from. And Paul and I both do that. Paul is my counterpoint in Wisconsin, my other part of fightbackmedia.com. We both do the very same thing. And it's funny because a lot of times we'll do that and then we'll get together to talk later and we will have the same thought on something, never ever having spoken to one another. Weird, huh? Yeah. So as far as just parroting back one of the talking heads on CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, when I first started this, someone said, a good friend of mine, my best friend said, so you're like Rush Limbaugh. I'm like, no, because my show was on Blog Talk Radio at noon, Monday through Friday. So guess who didn't get a chance to listen to Rush Limbaugh? I did. Never got a chance to listen to Rush Limbaugh while I was doing my podcast. The most Rush I heard was on holidays or on the weekends when they were doing, those compendiums or best of Rush. But no, following him around and parroting his opinions seemed lame. Seemed like, well, that's not what I want to do. Because I wasn't going to be able to do Rush better than Rush. Come on, that's dumb. He had 22 million listeners. I had 2. Kind of like now. No, I have 22 now. 22. He had 22 million. I had 22. So wasn't going to be the same. So there wasn't any reason for me to try to do that. But then I learned how important it was to get your sources of information from a lot of different places and then synthesize them into something that makes sense to you. Even if it was hard, even if it went against your grain. Now, the question is, should NPR, National Public Radio, based on what we know, based on an admission from its senior editor, should they continue to receive taxpayer dollars? Should they continue to receive taxpayer dollars? When it seems like my taxpayer dollars are going to, and your taxpayer dollars are going to an organization that doesn't really like us, that's trying to destroy whatever we build, doesn't seem like the way to go. Doesn't seem like they ought to be getting any of my money. Now, there is a local here where I live radio station, WMNF, which is listener funded. And they are super far left. And they make no bones about it. Somebody said, we approached them years ago and said, you guys should have a conservative show on. You got everybody else on. You got the women with a Y show. They had everything. Super far left. Great jazz show though. Great freaking jazz show. And they said no, because you could get that anyway. We're not gonna have a conservative show. Not, and they didn't, and they still haven't, or anything vaguely leaning towards the middle. No, but they're not taxpayer funded. They are listener funded, and they have their begathons, and they have been they've built a new studio in the past 20 years. It's gorgeous. I've been there. It's fabulous. And you know what? I ain't got no problem with that. I don't have any problem with WMNF. No problem at all. It's fine. And I never listen to them other than occasionally I may listen to the jazz show if I remember. Band Memorial Jazz Show. I forget the first name, but it's actually very good. They play good stuff. They have very, very knowledgeable DJs on that show. It's great. I have actually gotten to be on that show a couple of times. That's how much I like it. I've actually been on the radio at WMNF before. So, and on that show. But in any case, do you think that NPR needs to continue to receive any taxpayer dollars? That's the question. We keep supporting the people who hate us. My name is Willie Lawson. This has been the Morning Report for it is April 15th, tax day. Yay. Anyway, till we see you again, go out there and learn something, love somebody, and for goodness sakes, y'all take care of yourself. We will see you when we see you. Bye bye now.
في أكبر